This is a Fox News alert on the ongoing debate over the plans to build a mosque near Ground Zero. Earlier today, we learned that New York Governor David Paterson is making another push to have the location of that Islamic center moved. The plan getting a lot of reaction from families of 9/11 victims. I spoke to Debra Burlingame. Her brother Charles piloted the plane that was hijacked by terrorists and crashed into the Pentagon. Hear what she had to say in this powerful interview. Debra, welcome. We're glad you could join us today. I want to give folks some context on why you have the authority to speak on this topic. You lost your brother Charles on 9/11. He was a pilot of the plane that crashed into the Pentagon.
That's right.
So you do have the authority to talk about the emotions and the situation involved in this mosque as it plays out near Ground Zero. First of all, let's talk about the fact that the men who planned that day, who say and claim responsibility for planning that day, are still awaiting trial, whether it's here in New York or somewhere else. And yet we see the mosque moving ahead, and a lot of people have real problems with that contrast.
Well, I think it shows that the mixed up priorities, for instance, of our commander-in-chief, the president, gives a speech to the Muslim world basically scolding Americans about religious rights, religious freedom, when we live in a pretty free country, no backlash against Muslims here in 9/11. And yes, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and his cohorts asked to plead guilty in 2008, have boasted about their crimes, and they're still sitting there languishing. And so I think we should take care of that first before we start talking about bridge building on top of Ground Zero.
And when you look at the technicalities of this situation, the president came out and said, I'm not talking about the wisdom of where this location is for the mosque, but I'm talking about the foundations of this country, about religious freedom, about private property. So he's right on many of those respects, and the polls show that people understand those rights, but they think this is very inappropriate. The majority of our polling shows that. Does he get any credit for being right on the legalities, or do you think common sense overrides?
Let me tell you something. I find his using the firefighters, the responders, invoking their names to scold us about religious freedom, then turning around the next day and saying, listen, I'm not talking about the wisdom of this. That suggests to me that he knows there's a perfectly good and legitimate argument for not having this mosque at Ground Zero. So he used religious freedom as a straw man to beat us back and shut us up. And I don't find that honorable at all. Why didn't he come out right away and say, you know, a lot of tragedy and heartache down there. Find another place. Why would you want to open up a dialogue on top of the bodies of all these people? And no, I didn't think it was courageous at all. I think it was very cynical. And remember, it was beamed to the Muslim world.
And do you think that the reaction almost immediately within the next day or so from him, and then subsequent explanations from the press office at the White House, that they got a clue how this resonated and how it came across to people? Some have said it was condescending, or a lecture, sort of like a constitutional law professor telling you what it says on paper, what the statute says, versus taking in the entirety of how people would react to what he said.
Well, and if he feels so strongly about freedom of religion, why isn't he lecturing to some of his friends in the Muslim world about the lack of freedoms Muslims have, not only there but here, Sharia, honor killings, all of that? I don't hear him speaking out about that. So, yes, I find his lecturing tone incredibly patronizing and condescending, not only to us, families and Americans, but to Muslims themselves. They are screaming for help in the Muslim world about women's and children's, girls' rights. So, no, I find all of it quite specious and very disappointing from the leader of the free world.
And I will say, not everyone who supports the mosque, but a few that I've heard debate this have said to their opponents who would oppose this particular location, not mosques in general, not mosques in New York City, but that location, have accused opponents of being Islamophobic. I know that you have said we're not having honest conversations about religion and about religious freedom in this country. Can we get past some of the tension and do that?
Well, remember, when someone calls you a hater, an Islamophobe, what they're trying to do is intimidate you into shutting up. And we're not going to do that, because we know that's ridiculous. We have Muslims who are supporting us. There are Muslims who died on 9/11. Their family members are supporting us, not the imam. So we know that that's not what's going on here. And in fact, as I said before, when you talk about what this imam represents, what he wants to bring to Ground Zero and all the country, because he wants to franchise Cordoba houses, he said that, you're talking about oppression of Muslims. And so how is that Islamophobic? I think that is a straw man that they're using to quiet us, and I think that those family members who have supported it need to look into Sharia law. I think if they start reading about it, they'll be as horrified as we are.
Okay, some of those supporting the mosque, including the imam, talk about the fact that this is going to be a place of healing, a place of interfaith dialogue, and a chance to meet at the table and have those conversations and share across faith boundaries. Does that give you any consolation?
I don't see how the man can say that with a straight face. I mean, seriously, you don't smash someone in the face and then say, let's talk about healing. He's already basically undermined his entire project by first, instead of going to families and saying, I have this vision, I have this idea, I think that we can bring the East and the West together, the Muslims and non-Muslims together. How can I do it? Can I do it at ground zero? Is it appropriate? Will you help me? Is it workable? Will you partner with me? No, he went to politicians and the cultural elites of the city. He did that before he launched his public PR campaign, and only after it exploded in his face did he then say, I want to reach out to the families. We don't believe him. We think it is utterly disingenuous, and he has lied over and over and over again about who he is and his intentions. And so now we don't trust this man to build a mosque anywhere. Much less at ground zero.
I want to ask you quickly, at the end of the day, this battle could rage on for years with litigation and zoning and other things. At the end of the day, do you think that mosque gets built at that location?
No, it will not be built. I'm not saying that some other Muslim might come along and build a tiny little mosque that we have no objection to, but this giant 15-story mosque, which is being funded by Muslim states, Islamic states, Saudi Arabia has partnered with this imam on other programs. Saudi Arabia, one of the biggest funders of 9/11, where 15 of the hijackers came from. This man and this mega mosque will never happen there. No.
Debra Burlingame, great to see you today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Shannon.